The day my son and his wife won $75 million in the lottery, they looked me in the eye and told me I was no longer welcome in their home. "Dad," my son David said coldly, "we don't need your little pension checks anymore. You've served your purpose. It's time for you to go live somewhere else." His wife, Clara, smirked and added with venom, "Honestly, it would be better if you just disappeared. You're holding us back from the life we deserve." Imagine that. A man gives everything, blood, sweat, sleepless nights, and decades of sacrifice, to raise his only son, only to be tossed aside like garbage the very moment fortune shines on him. But what David and Clara didn't realize was this: the golden ticket in Clara's trembling hand wasn't theirs at all. It was mine. I bought it. I chose the numbers. I carried the hope in my pocket for over 30 years. They thought they were kings and queens crowned with money, but soon they would learn that paper crowns burn quickly when exposed to truth. Before I tell you how I turned their betrayal into the sweetest revenge a father could ever taste, I want to invite you into this story fully. If you've ever been disrespected, underestimated, or pushed aside by the very people you gave your life to, then stay with me until the end. Because what I'm about to share isn't just about money, it's about justice. And trust me, justice delivered by a father cuts deeper than any sword. If you're watching this on YouTube right now, don't forget to subscribe, drop a comment about where you're listening from, and share your thoughts on family loyalty. Because stories like this aren't just entertainment, they're reminders. Reminders that greed destroys, but wisdom endures. Now let's step back 3 weeks before that dreadful day when David and Clara showed me who they truly were. It was a cold, gray morning in December, the kind of morning that seeps into your bones and makes you feel the weight of years. I walked the same path I'd walked every Friday for decades, heading toward the corner store to buy my weekly lottery ticket. Same numbers I'd played since 1990, numbers carved into my life story, my wedding day, my son's birthday, the house number where his mother and I built our lives brick by brick. Those numbers weren't just digits, they were memories, they were sacrifices, they were love. And little did I know, they would soon become my weapon of justice. I still remember the first time I held David in my arms. He was so small, wrapped in a blue hospital blanket, his tiny fingers curling around mine. In that moment, I made a silent promise that I would give this boy everything I had, even if it cost me my health, my time, and my peace. And for decades, I kept that promise. While other men spent their weekends fishing or watching games, I worked double shifts at the steel plant. My hands were calloused, my back permanently bent, but I never complained. Every bruise, every burn, every ache, it all meant food on the table, shoes on my son's feet, and books for his education. When David wanted to play baseball, I was there in the yard after long shifts, tossing the ball back and forth under the dim glow of the porch light. When he needed help with his school projects, I stayed up late cutting cardboard and scribbling diagrams, even if I had to wake up at 4 a.m. the next day. I missed vacations. I skipped luxuries. I sacrificed, because that's what fathers do. But sacrifice has a way of going unnoticed when children grow into adults who forget the cost of their comfort. Years passed, and David found Clara. At first, I welcomed her with open arms. She was sharp, ambitious, and carried herself like she was born to climb ladders. I thought she would bring out the best in my son. Instead, she brought out the worst, feeding his pride, inflating his ego, and whispering poison into his ear about how they deserved better than the simple life I had worked so hard to provide. When my wife passed away, I was left alone in the house we had built together, 40 years of memories tucked inside those walls. David suggested I move in with him and Clara. He called it family support. I should have known better. At first, it seemed like kindness. They gave me the guest room. Clara said it would be like a hotel with my own space and family close by. But slowly, I realized I wasn't a guest at all. I was a tenant. No, worse, I was an employee without pay. It started with small requests. "Dad, can you watch the kids while we go out?" "Dad, could you cook dinner tonight?" "Dad, you're already home. Can you wait for the plumber?" Little by little, my role shifted. I wasn't the father who had raised a son. I was the servant who existed to make their lives easier. And the cruelest part? They charged me rent. Rent that drained my pension and left me with barely enough for my own needs. I should have seen the trap tightening. But grief makes you blind. Love makes you vulnerable. and I was both. At first, I told myself it was temporary. A little help with their kids, a few chores, and a portion of my pension, all in the name of family harmony. But family harmony quickly turned into family servitude. What began as favors became expectations. Dad, you'll take Emma and Noah to school, right? We're busy. Dad, don't forget to mow the lawn this weekend. Dad, the dry cleaning needs picking up. You're retired, so you've got the time. Retired, that's what they called it, as if retirement meant I had no right to rest, no right to peace. As if decades of back-breaking work were nothing more than a warm-up for the unpaid labor they now demanded. Clara, in particular, had a gift for turning every request into a command. She spoke to me not like a daughter-in-law, but like a landlord collecting rent from a broke tenant. One morning, she even laid out a spreadsheet at the kitchen table. "We need to formalize your share of expenses," she said, her voice smooth but sharp. There it was, $1,500 a month. Rent, utilities, food, my entire pension, gone. Every dollar I'd worked for, siphoned into their household, leaving me with almost nothing. "Clara," I said carefully, "I raised this boy. I built a home with my hands. I'm not some stranger renting space. I'm family." Her eyes didn't even flicker. "Exactly, and family pulls its weight." David stayed silent, staring at his coffee mug like the truth might be written at the bottom. My son, the boy I taught to stand tall, couldn't even look me in the eye while his wife bled me dry, and so I became what they wanted me to be, the invisible servant. I cooked, I cleaned, I cared for their children. At their dinner parties, I served food and drinks, then disappeared upstairs like an unwanted shadow. Guests laughed in the living room while I scrubbed dishes in the sink. But the final insult came one snowy evening. Clara spread blueprints across the dining table with a bright smile. "We're thinking of converting the basement into your own suite, Dad. Isn't that exciting? You'll have privacy, and your own entrance." Privacy. That was her word for exile. I looked at David. He shifted uncomfortably but nodded in agreement. "It'll be good for everyone, Dad. You'll be independent." Independent? Number. They wanted me buried beneath their feet, out of sight, out of mind. That night, sitting alone in the so-called guest room, I realized I had become a burden in the house of the very child I once carried on my shoulders. But life has a way of shifting in silence, and though they thought they had trapped me, fate was preparing to hand me the sharpest weapon of all. Every Friday morning for more than 3 decades, I carried out the same ritual. No matter the weather, rain, snow, or blazing summer heat, I walked to the corner store and bought a lottery ticket. The cashier, an old friend's son named Jeremy, always greeted me the same way. "Morning, Mr. Harris. The usual numbers?" I'd nod, hand him my $5, and watch as the ticket slid from the machine. The same 6 numbers, chosen not at random, but carved out of my life. 7. The day I married the love of my life, Mary. 14. The day my son David was born, when I swore I'd give him the world. 23. The date we bought our first little house, the one Mary painted herself. 31. The age I was when I worked 3 jobs at once to keep food on the table. 45. The number of years I spent sweating in the steel mill before retirement. And Powerball 19. The age David was when I watched him graduate, bursting with pride. To anyone else, they were just numbers. To me, they were my story written in code. Every ticket I bought was a reminder of sacrifice, love, and resilience. And though I'd never won more than a couple of free plays, I never gave up. Because those numbers weren't about luck, they were about faith. Faith that one day, after a lifetime of carrying others, life might carry me. That Friday, snow whipped against my face as I walked the familiar path. My joints ached, but there was a strange fire in my chest. Maybe it was anger from Clara's basement plan. Maybe it was something deeper, an unshakable sense that destiny was turning its wheel. "Rough weather for walking, Mr. Harris," Jeremy said as I stepped into the warm store. I handed him the crumpled $5 bill. "Son, I've walked through worse storms than this. Give me the usual." He chuckled and pressed the buttons. Out came the ticket, warm and fresh, like a promise. I tucked it carefully into my wallet, right beside a faded photograph of Mary, her smile frozen in time. "Cross your fingers for me," I told him. "Always do," he said. "You're due for some good luck." He didn't know how prophetic those words were. That night, as I stared out the window of the guest room, snow falling like ashes, the ticket rested in my wallet. And though I didn't know it yet, it wasn't just paper. It was justice waiting to be claimed. That Friday night, I sat alone in the dim glow of the television. My bones were heavy, but sleep was impossible. The day's bitterness still clung to me. Clara's smug face, David's silence, the blueprints of my exile to the basement. At 10:59 p.m., the lottery drawing came on. I almost didn't watch. After all, I'd been watching for 30 years, and disappointment had become routine. Still, habit made me lean forward. The anchor's voice rang out. Tonight's winning numbers are 7, 14, 23, 31, 45, and the Powerball, 19. I froze. My heart thundered in my chest. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my wallet. The ticket slipped between my fingers, and for a terrifying second, I thought I'd lost it. But then it was there, staring back at me. Every number matched. Every single one. $75 million. I sat there in silence, the sound of the refrigerator humming louder than the newscaster's voice. My throat was dry. My body refused to move. 30 years of hope had turned into 30 seconds of disbelief. I thought of Mary. I thought of the long nights she waited up for me, dinner cold on the table after my double shifts. I thought of how we pinched pennies so David could go to college, how we sacrificed vacations, how we chose struggle so our son would never have to. And now, destiny had finally chosen me. My first instinct was to shout, to run down the stairs and tell David and Clara, to share the miracle. But then reality settled like a shadow. Would they celebrate with me, or would they see dollar signs instead of a father? I remembered Clara's words, "You'll have privacy," in the basement. I remembered David's silence, his unwillingness to stand up for me. Number not this time, not this victory. This one was mine. I folded the ticket carefully, tucking it behind Mary's photograph in my wallet. It didn't just represent money. It represented freedom. It represented justice. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, a smile tugging at the corner of my mouth for the first time in years. They thought I was weak, a burden, a shadow in their home. But I knew something they didn't. While they plotted to bury me in the basement, I held in my hands the key to burying their greed. The next morning began like any other in their house of demands. Clara buzzed around the kitchen, phone in one hand, coffee in the other, barking orders at David as if he were her assistant instead of her husband. David sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, half listening. I was in the living room with Emma and Noah, helping them with a puzzle. Their laughter was the only warmth in that house anymore. For a brief moment I forgot the storm brewing inside my wallet. But storms don't stay hidden for long. "Dad, where are those grocery coupons you clipped?" Clara called from the kitchen. "In my wallet, side pocket," I replied without looking up. Seconds later, I heard silence. A dangerous, loaded silence. Then came her voice, sharp and trembling. "Oh my God! David, come here, now!" My stomach dropped. I turned slowly, and there she was, standing by the counter, her face pale, her hands clutching a small slip of paper like it was burning her. The ticket. My ticket. "Is this... Did you..." She couldn't even form the words. Instead, she shoved the phone at David, showing him the winning numbers. "Look, look!" David's eyes widened. His phone slipped from his hand and clattered on the floor. He grabbed the ticket, reading the numbers over and over as if trying to will a mistake into existence. This is real," he whispered. 75 million. We're rich." Clara's expression shifted instantly from shock to ecstasy. She clapped her hands, laughing like a child on Christmas morning. "We did it, David. We finally made it. We're free. We." Not once did they look at me. Not once did they acknowledge whose wallet that ticket came from, whose numbers those were, whose decades of persistence made that miracle possible. Instead, Clara spun in circles, already making plans. "We'll move into a mansion. No, several. We'll travel the world. Emma and Noah will go to the most exclusive schools. And you know what? We don't need to bother with the basement plans anymore. Dad can go straight to a luxury senior home, one of those high-end ones where they tuck him away nicely." She said it so casually, so heartlessly, as if I were luggage to be stored, not a father who had built their foundation with his own blood. I stayed seated, calm, almost amused. Let them dream. Let them count their riches and build castles in the air. Because soon I would remind them of one simple truth. The name on that ticket wasn't theirs. It was mine. The kitchen erupted with frantic chatter as Clara paced, already on the phone with her sister. 75 million, can you believe it? We're set for life. No more worries, no more bills. This is our miracle. David stood rooted in place, the ticket still trembling in his hands, his face pale with shock. Emma and Noah were jumping up and down, asking if we were rich now. Clara swooped them up with dramatic flair, shouting, "Yes, babies! We're rich beyond imagination. Mommy and Daddy did it." I watched it all from the kitchen table, hands folded, heart steady. For once, I didn't feel small in that house. I felt like a mountain, watching ants scramble at my feet. Finally, I stood and cleared my throat. "There's just one detail you two seem to be forgetting." They both froze. Clara's smile faltered. David frowned. "What do you mean, Dad?" I stepped closer, extending my hand toward the ticket. David hesitated, then reluctantly placed it back into my palm. I stared at those numbers, my numbers, before looking them straight in the eye. "I mean, this ticket is in my name. I bought it, with my money, with the numbers I've played every Friday for over 30 years, which makes this—" I held it up, letting the paper flutter between my fingers. "Mine, not yours." The silence that followed was suffocating. Clara's face turned crimson, then ghostly white, then crimson again. "What are you talking about?" she snapped. "We're family. Family shares everything. That money changes all of our lives, not just yours." "No," I said firmly, my voice sharper than a blade. "It changes mine, because for years I've given you my pension, my labor, my dignity, and in return you've given me chores, insults, and a blueprint to the basement. That ends today." David swallowed hard, panic creeping into his eyes. "Dad, don't be rash. This is too big for one person. You'll need help managing it. Taxes, investments, security, it's complicated." I leaned in close enough for him to feel the weight of my words. "I managed 30 years of double shifts. I managed raising you when we had nothing. I managed burying my wife with dignity when my heart was broken in half. I think I can manage a piece of paper and a bank account." Clara tried again, her tone sugar-sweet, but her eyes burning. "Dad, you're misunderstanding. The money belongs to all of us. You live here. You're part of this household." I tucked the ticket into my wallet, sliding it behind Mary's photograph with deliberate care. Then I straightened my shoulders. "No, Clara, I don't live in this household. I survive in it. But not anymore. Not after today." For a moment, no one moved. The only sound in the room was the low hum of the refrigerator. Clara's painted smile was gone, replaced by a twitching jaw and eyes darting like a trapped animal. David's hands ran through his hair again and again, the way he used to when he was caught lying as a boy. Finally, Clara broke the silence. Her voice was sickly sweet, dripping with false affection. "Dad, sweetheart, I think there's been a misunderstanding. You don't have to say the ticket is yours. We're family. We'll manage everything together. We'll take care of you." I almost laughed. Take care of me? These were the same people who wanted me shoved into a basement like forgotten furniture. "You mean like you've taken care of me already?" I said sharply. "Charging me rent to live under my own son's roof? Making me cook, clean, and babysit as if I were staff? Planning to bury me beneath your feet while you sipped champagne upstairs?" David's face reddened. "Dad, that's not fair. We just wanted what was best for everyone." I slammed my hand on the table. The sound made both of them flinch. "Best for everyone, or best for you? Don't insult me with excuses. I gave my life to build you a future, and you've repaid me with greed." David lowered his gaze, but Clara wasn't done. She stepped closer, her voice quick, her words spilling like a desperate sales pitch. "Listen, you don't understand how dangerous this kind of money is. 75 million isn't a blessing. It's a curse if you don't manage it right. Did you know most lottery winners go bankrupt within 5 years? They get swindled, robbed, ruined. You need professionals. You need guidance. You need us." I stared at her, unblinking. "Funny. You're suddenly worried about me losing money when you've spent years draining every cent I had left. Tell me, Clara, how many of those expensive handbags, vacations, and salon trips were funded by the pension of the man you're pretending to protect?" Her lips tightened, but her eyes betrayed her fury. David finally spoke again, his voice soft, almost pleading. "Dad, please, don't shut us out. We're your family. We love you. We just want to help." For a long moment, I said nothing. I looked at my son, the boy I had once carried on my shoulders, the man now standing before me as a beggar, not for love, but for money. "Love?" I said finally, my voice low and cold. "If this is love, son, then I'd hate to see what betrayal looks like." The kitchen that once felt like a cage now felt like a battlefield. I stood tall, ticket secured in my wallet, while across from me, David and Clara looked like soldiers stripped of their weapons. Clara's voice lost its honeyed charm. Her mask cracked, and what spilled out was pure venom. "You can't do this, old man. You wouldn't even have a roof over your head if it weren't for us. We've carried you, we've fed you, and now you think you can just take 75 million and walk away?" I let her words hang in the air for a moment before replying. "Carried me? You mean drained me? Fed me? You mean fed off me? Every dollar of my pension, every ounce of my energy, every shred of dignity, you swallowed it whole. But here's the difference. I gave it freely because I believed family should stand together. You, on the other hand, have treated me like a burden to be managed and milked. That ends tonight." David stepped forward, his hands raised in a desperate attempt to calm the storm. His voice cracked with panic. "Dad, please, think this through. Don't make this harder than it has to be. We're in this together. You've always said family above everything." I locked eyes with him. "Yes, son. Family above everything. But tell me, when you signed off on Clara's plan to bury me in the basement, was that family above everything? When you let her demand every penny of my pension, was that family above everything? Or was it convenience above everything? Greed above everything?" His lips trembled, but no words came. The truth silenced him more effectively than any shout could. Clara slammed her palm on the counter, her patience gone. "Fine. You want to play stubborn? Go ahead. But mark my words. You'll regret this. You're an old man with no clue how to handle this kind of money. The world will eat you alive, and when it does, don't come crawling back to us." Her words cut through the air, but instead of fear, I felt only a deep, steady calm. For the first time in years, I was no longer the servant in their house. I was the father again, the man who built, who sacrificed, who endured. I looked at both of them, my son, broken by greed, and his wife, consumed by it. Then I said quietly, "The only people crawling will be you, when you realize 75 million can't buy back respect." And with that, I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving them stunned in the silence of their collapsing illusion. The news spread faster than wildfire on a dry summer day. By Sunday morning, word of a winning ticket sold in our small town had reached every diner, church pew, and street corner. Neighbors whispered, phones buzzed, reporters swarmed. By noon, 3 news vans were parked outside David and Clara's pristine suburban home. Their driveway, once a symbol of status with its shiny cars and manicured hedges, was now a stage for cameras and microphones. I watched from the upstairs window, calm as ever, as Clara flung the door open with her best smile. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless. She waved at the cameras like a beauty queen who thought she owned the crown. "Yes, it's true," she said sweetly, her voice carrying down the street. "We're just so grateful for this blessing. It's going to change all our lives. All our lives." The way she emphasized those words made bile rise in my throat. She wasn't lying for herself anymore. She was lying for the cameras, the neighbors, the world, claiming my miracle as her own. Behind her, David hovered, nodding, trying to look confident, though his eyes betrayed unease. He wasn't cut out for the spotlight, but greed had shoved him into it. When a reporter asked where the lucky ticket holder was, Clara laughed nervously. "Oh, he's resting. He doesn't like too much attention, but we'll be speaking as a family soon." Resting. That was her cover story for hiding me upstairs like some fragile relic. I stepped back from the window, shaking my head. For decades, I had carried steel beams heavier than men, endured the flames of furnaces, and fought through pain that would break most. And here she was painting me as a frail old man who couldn't handle a little attention. The truth burned in my chest, not just about the ticket, but about the years of exploitation, the rent, the labor, the humiliation. And now this, their attempt to erase me from my own victory. That evening, I called my lawyer, Mr. Jacobs. He had been with me and Mary through every will, every mortgage, every contract that kept us afloat. His voice was steady. Congratulations, Mr. Harris, but be careful. Money brings out the wolves, especially in family. He didn't need to tell me twice. I'd already seen the wolves circling. And as I hung up the phone, hearing the reporters still buzzing outside, I knew one thing for certain. The time for quiet endurance was over. Tomorrow, I would step into the light myself. And when I did, the world would hear the truth from my mouth, not theirs. The next morning, the front yard was a circus. Reporters crowded the walkway, cameras ready, voices buzzing with the same hungry question. Who was the winner? Clara strutted around in her finest dress, rehearsing answers in the mirror, while David paced nervously by the window. They hadn't even spoken to me that morning, too busy polishing the image of their miracle. I sat quietly in my room, staring at Mary's faded photograph tucked inside my wallet beside the ticket. Her eyes, even in black and white, reminded me of strength, reminded me of dignity. And I knew then it was time to speak. When I stepped out of my room, Clara nearly dropped her coffee. Dad, no, you can't go out there. You'll confuse things. Just let us handle the media. I brushed past her without a word. David tried to block the front door, panic flashing in his eyes. Dad, please, they'll eat you alive. Just let us speak on your behalf. I looked him dead in the eye. Son, I've eaten fire and steel for 30 years. I can handle a few microphones. And with that, I opened the door. The reporters surged forward like a wave. Mr. Harris, are you the winner? How does it feel to have $75 million in your pocket? I stood tall on the porch, the winter air biting, but my voice steady. Yes, I am the winner. The ticket was mine, bought with my money, with the numbers I've played faithfully for over 3 decades. A murmur swept through the crowd. Cameras clicked. I continued, louder this time. And let me be clear, I have not been living in luxury. I have not been pampered. For 2 years, I have been paying $1,500 a month in rent to live in my son's house. I have been cooking, cleaning, and babysitting as if I were staff. And just last week they planned to bury me in the basement like unwanted baggage. Gasps erupted. Some reporters leaned in closer. Are you saying your own son and daughter-in-law exploited you, Mr. Harris? I looked straight into the cameras, my jaw tight. I am saying that family is supposed to mean respect, loyalty, love. But what I found here was business transactions, greed, and betrayal. And now, thanks to this ticket, I will finally have the freedom to live on my own terms, without being treated as a burden. Behind me, I could hear Clara's sharp intake of breath and David's stammered protests. But the truth was already out. The world had seen. For the first time in years, I felt something stir in my chest. Pride. Not for them. For myself. For finally standing tall again. By that afternoon, the entire neighborhood knew the truth. What Clara had painted as a fairy tale, her victory, her blessing, her new life, had crumbled in front of cameras, and I had made sure the cracks were visible to everyone. Reporters replayed my words on every local channel. Family is supposed to mean respect, loyalty, love, but what I found here was business transactions, greed, and betrayal. Within hours, the whispers began. Old friends from the mill called, their voices heavy with pride. About time someone stood up to them, Harris. We all knew Clara was poison. You did the right thing. Don't let them steal what's yours. At church that Sunday, people who once pitied me now shook my hand firmly. You're an example, the pastor said. You showed the courage many of us never find. Meanwhile, David and Clara couldn't leave the house without stares cutting into them like knives. The same neighbors who once envied their fancy cars now looked at them with disgust. Parents whispered in hushed tones at the school pickup line. Clara's friends, who had once giggled in her kitchen about monetizing the father-in-law, stopped answering her calls. Inside that house, the atmosphere had changed completely. Clara stomped from room to room like a caged tiger, hissing under her breath about image control and public relations. She tried to convince David that they could still spin it, that they could paint me as a confused old man. But the truth had spread too far, too fast. David, on the other hand, grew quiet. He couldn't look me in the eye anymore. He shuffled past me in the hallway, his shoulders hunched, his pride in ashes. For the first time, he wasn't the man of the house. He was just a boy again, a boy who had betrayed his father and now stood exposed before the world. And me? For the first time in years, I walked tall, not just because of the money, but because of what it represented. I was no longer the servant in their house, no longer the old man destined for the basement. I was Harris again, a man with dignity, a father who had taken back his voice. But I knew this battle wasn't over. Greed doesn't die quietly. Clara wasn't the type to surrender. She was the type to scheme in silence, to twist and plot until she found another angle. And when she came for me again, I was ready, because I had more than 75 million in my corner. I had the truth, and the truth was heavier than gold. The day after my statement went public, I drove into town to meet my lawyer, Mr. Jacobs. He'd been by my side for decades, through mortgages, wills, and the painful paperwork after Mary passed. If there was anyone I could trust, it was him. When I entered his office, he greeted me with a firm handshake and a knowing smile. "Congratulations, Harris. Though I have to say, I'm not surprised. Life has a way of evening its scales." I sat across from him, the lottery ticket safely tucked in my wallet. "I'm not here to celebrate, Jacobs. I'm here to protect myself, because I know my son and his wife won't stop until they've bled me dry." Jacobs nodded slowly, then slid a thick folder across the desk. "I anticipated that. That's why I did some digging. And what I found, well, you need to see it." I opened the folder, and my breath caught. Page after page of debts, unpaid bills, and red numbers screamed up at me. David and Clara weren't living in luxury. They were drowning in it. $48,000 in credit card debt, Jacobs said, tapping the papers. A mortgage underwater by nearly $35,000. 2 car loans, nearly $20,000 combined. And Clara's boutique business, operating at a loss for almost a year. I stared at the documents, my jaw tightening. All those nights they had shamed me for not contributing enough. All those speeches about pulling my weight, about being fair. Meanwhile, they were sinking, and using me as their life raft. Jacobs leaned back, his expression grim. "If you hadn't been handing over your pension every month, they would have collapsed already. They weren't hosting you. You were funding them." It all snapped into place. The expensive trips, the constant renovations, the endless parties. They weren't a wealthy young couple. They were desperate gamblers, clinging to an image they couldn't afford. For a moment, my chest ached with something worse than anger, disappointment. My son, the boy I raised with sweat and sacrifice, had become a man who built his life on lies. I closed the folder and exhaled slowly. They thought they were using me. They thought they had me trapped. But the truth is, they've been hanging by a thread, and I was the thread keeping them alive. Jacobs gave a thin smile. "Now the question is, what do you want to do with this information?" I didn't answer right away. I simply stared at Mary's picture in my wallet, her soft smile reminding me of the promises I once made. Then I looked up, voice steady as iron. "I want them to face the truth, and I want them to feel what it's like to be powerless." That evening, I told David and Clara we needed to have a family meeting. Clara smirked, certain it meant I was ready to cooperate. David looked relieved, thinking maybe his pleading had softened me. They had no idea they were walking straight into a reckoning. I sat in the living room with Jacob's folder on the coffee table, waiting as they came in. David carried a bottle of wine, trying to set a civil tone, while Clara marched in with her laptop in a thick binder. She laid it out with a dramatic flourish. "We've prepared a comprehensive plan, Dad," she said, smiling as if she were presenting to investors. "We'll handle the investments, the taxes, the estate planning. You won't have to worry about a thing. You can just relax and let us take care of it." Her confidence was nauseating. David nodded eagerly beside her. "We know this is overwhelming, Dad, but we're family. We just want what's best for you." I didn't touch her binder. Instead, I slid Jacob's folder across the table. "Before we talk about my financial security," I said evenly, "let's talk about yours." Clara frowned, confused. David opened the folder hesitantly, and the color drained from his face. His hands shook as he flipped through page after page of debts, balances, and overdue notices. What is this?" he stammered. "It's your reality," I said coldly. 48,000 in credit card debt, a mortgage drowning in red, 2 car loans you can't afford, and Clara, your boutique business has been bleeding money for months. Without my pension, you'd already be underwater." Clara's eyes widened, her composure cracking. "How dare you invade our privacy?" I leaned forward, my gaze steady. "Privacy? You invaded my dignity. You charged me $1,500 a month to live in a house I helped build with my sweat, then treated me like a maid. You planned to bury me in the basement while you toasted champagne upstairs. And now, you want me to hand over 75 million so you can keep living your fantasy? David's voice cracked. Dad, please, it's not like that. I cut him off. It's exactly like that. You didn't want a father. You wanted a bank. The room fell silent, their illusions stripped bare. Clara's binder sat useless on the table, her plans crumbling before her eyes. I stood, sliding the folder back into my bag. From now on, your debts are your problem, not mine, and you'd better start figuring out how to stand without leaning on the man you tried to bury. The silence that followed my words was deafening. David sat slumped on the couch, staring at the folder as though it were a death sentence. Clara, on the other hand, wasn't ready to accept defeat. She straightened her back, forced a smile, and tried one last desperate tactic. Fine, she said coldly. Maybe we made mistakes. Maybe we've relied on you too much. But think about this. 75 million is not just your future. It's generational wealth. It belongs to all of us. To David, to the kids, to me. I turned slowly to face her. No, Clara. It belongs to the man who spent 30 years breaking his body in a steel mill. It belongs to the husband who buried his wife with dignity after a lifetime of sacrifice. It belongs to the father who gave up every dream so his son could have his. And that man is me. Her smile cracked. David finally lifted his head, his eyes glassy. Dad, don't do this. Please. We need you. I need you. I studied him carefully, searching for the boy I once knew, the boy who used to run into my arms after baseball practice, sweaty and smiling, asking if I was proud. But all I saw now was a man hollowed out by greed, begging not for love, but for money. You don't need me, I said softly. You need my wallet. And there's a difference. Clara's composure shattered. She slammed her hand against the binder. You can't cut us out. You're an old man. You'll get lost in this money. You'll ruin yourself without us. I stepped closer, my voice steady as steel. I've survived poverty, war, and backbreaking labor. I've endured grief you'll never understand. You think 75 million will ruin me? Number it will free me. It will ruin you, because without me, your house of cards collapses. David buried his face in his hands. Clara paced like a wild animal, muttering about lawyers, about rights, about claims she could never prove. The mighty power couple who once lorded over me were now nothing but two frightened children in a storm too big for them to weather. And for the first time in years, I wasn't the weak one in this house. I wasn't the servant. I wasn't the burden. I was the father again. The man who built everything they stood on, and the man who could walk away, leaving them with nothing but the weight of their own greed. The next morning, the house was silent. No shouting, no scheming, just the heavy air of defeat. David hadn't slept. I could see it in the hollow rings under his eyes. Clara sat at the kitchen table, tapping her manicured nails against her cold coffee, her mind clearly racing for another plan. But for me, the decision had already been made. I packed my small suitcase, the same one I'd carried decades ago when Mary and I took our first trip together. A few clothes, my old watch, Mary's picture, and of course, the winning ticket. Everything else, the chores, the rent, the humiliation, I left behind. When I stepped into the kitchen, Clara's head snapped up. "Where are you going?" "To start my life," I said simply. Her voice rose, shrill with panic. "You can't just walk out. You owe us. After everything we've done for you." I cut her off with a sharp laugh. "Everything you've done for me? You mean charging me $1,500 a month to live in your guest room? You mean working me like a servant while you spent my pension? You mean planning to shove me into the basement like I was a forgotten box of junk? If that's what you call generosity, I'd hate to see cruelty." David stood, his voice breaking. "Dad, please, don't leave like this. We can fix it. We can start over." I looked at him, my only son, and for a fleeting second, sorrow pierced my chest. I had dreamed of leaving him a legacy of love, wisdom, and pride. Instead, all I could leave him now was the bitter lesson of consequence. "I gave you everything, David," I said quietly. "My years, my sweat, my faith. And when I was at my weakest, you chose greed over love. You chose convenience over respect. That was your decision, and this is mine." Clara's face twisted in rage. You'll regret this, old man. Without us, you'll be eaten alive. I walked to the door, suitcase in hand, and turned one last time. No, Clara. Without me, you will be eaten alive, by your debts, by your lies, and by the emptiness that money can never fill. And with that, I stepped outside. The cold air hit my face crisp and sharp, but for the first time in years, I felt free. Every step away from that house was a step back into myself, the man Mary loved, the father I was meant to be, and the man who finally chose dignity over chains. The moment I stepped out of that house, I felt lighter. For 2 years, I'd walked its halls like a ghost, carrying shame that wasn't mine. Now, each step away was a step toward freedom. I drove straight to Meadowbrook Senior Community, a place I had visited once with Mary years ago. Back then, we'd dreamed of retiring there together, enjoying peaceful days, surrounded by gardens and laughter. Life had stolen that dream from us, but fate had finally handed me the chance to reclaim a piece of it. The director greeted me warmly, her smile genuine, not calculating. She showed me a spacious apartment, 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, sunlight streaming through wide windows. There was a community garden, a library, and even a small wood shop where residents could build and create. "This could be yours," she said gently. For the first time in a long while, I didn't hesitate. "I'll take it," I replied. And just like that, my exile became a new beginning. Moving in was simple. My life no longer consisted of cluttered obligations, only the essentials I carried with me: Mary's photograph, my watch, my faith. The rest, the debts, the manipulation, the burden, was left behind with David and Clara. Word of my independence spread quickly. Neighbors stopped by with casseroles and handshakes, congratulating me not only for the win, but for the courage to break free. Even strangers recognized me from the news, their eyes filled with admiration. "You spoke for all of us, Mr. Harris," one man told me in the grocery store. "Too many parents get used by their own kids. You gave us a voice." Those words meant more than the millions in my bank account. Respect. That was the true wealth I had earned back. At Meadowbrook, I found myself smiling again. I joined a weekly chess group, something I hadn't done since my 20s. I took morning walks, the crisp air filling my lungs with the reminder that I was still alive, still strong. And in the quiet evenings, I sat by my window, looking at Mary's picture. "We made it, love," I whispered. "They tried to break me, but we won. Not just the money, but the justice." I wasn't naive. I knew David and Clara wouldn't let go easily. Greed doesn't die quietly. It claws, it begs, it schemes. But I wasn't afraid anymore, because I wasn't the frail old man they thought they could exploit. I was Harris, a father, a worker, a man of dignity. And now I was free. Freedom tasted sweet, but the real justice came in watching David and Clara's empire of lies crumble piece by piece. The media had latched onto my story, the father who had been exploited by his own son and daughter-in-law, only to turn the tables with a $75 million win. It was the kind of tale people couldn't resist. Reporters framed it as a modern parable: greed punished, wisdom rewarded. And while I settled into my new home, their lives unraveled. David's office colleagues whispered behind his back, their respect gone. Once proud of his flashy suits and big talk, they now saw him for what he was: a man who lived on borrowed money and his father's pension. Clara's boutique, already hanging by a thread, collapsed completely. Customers stopped coming. Her so-called friends, the same women who once laughed at her dinner parties, now mocked her behind closed doors. Nobody wanted to be associated with the woman who tried to monetize her father-in-law and got caught in the spotlight. Debt collectors began circling, with no pension checks flowing into their account and their credit cards maxed out. The facade cracked quickly. Cars were repossessed. Their grand home, once the jewel of the neighborhood, was put up for sale. The same neighbors who used to envy them now shook their heads with pity. And the sweetest part? I didn't have to lift a finger. I simply watched as the very trap they built for me snapped shut on them instead. They had wanted to bury me in a basement, but now they were the ones buried, under bills, under shame, under the weight of their own greed. One evening, as I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, I received a knock on the door. A neighbor handed me the local paper. Right there on the front page was a photo of David, his head in his hands, leaving the courthouse after another hearing about unpaid debts. Clara trailed behind him, her face pale and hollow. The headline read, "From riches to ruin. Couple at center of lottery scandal faces collapse." I set the paper down and let out a long breath. It wasn't gloating I felt. It was closure. The world finally saw them as I had. Greedy, manipulative, shallow. And me? I wasn't just free. I was vindicated. For once, justice wasn't a dream. It was reality, playing out in the open for all to see. As the weeks passed, I found myself thinking less about the money and more about the meaning of it all. $75 million could buy a mansion, cars, vacations, but it couldn't buy back what had been lost: trust, loyalty, respect. And yet, in losing those things through betrayal, I had discovered something more valuable: clarity. I thought often about David, my boy, my only son. I remembered the little hands that once clutched mine, the wide eyes that once looked up at me with admiration. I had dreamed of guiding him into manhood with honor and wisdom, but somewhere along the way, greed had stolen his heart, twisting him into a stranger. It hurt, yes, but hurt can either break a man or sharpen him. I chose the latter. Everywhere I went, people wanted to hear my story, not because of the money, but because of the lesson inside it. Parents told me they saw themselves in me. Sons and daughters admitted they saw pieces of David in their own choices. And strangers told me it gave them courage to stand up for their dignity, no matter their age. Respect, I told them, is worth more than gold. A father's sacrifice can build empires, but when that sacrifice is met with betrayal, it becomes the sharpest sword. Money is fleeting. Dignity is forever. At Meadowbrook, I started sharing my story at community gatherings, not as a boast, but as a warning. I wanted others to know that silence in the face of exploitation only feeds greed, that sometimes the hardest but most necessary word a parent can say to their own child is no. And as I spoke, I could almost feel Mary beside me, her hand on my shoulder, proud of the man I had become. Not a rich man, but a wise one. One evening, after telling my story to a group of neighbors, a woman asked me, "Do you ever regret it? Cutting them off completely?" I thought for a moment, staring out at the setting sun. "No," I said quietly, "because regret is for those who act too late. I acted when the moment came. I gave them every chance to honor me, and they chose greed. My only regret is that they'll have to learn their lesson the hard way." I leaned back, the weight lifted from my chest. For me, the lesson was clear. Wealth isn't counted in dollars, but in respect. And once respect is lost, no fortune can ever buy it back. It was a rainy evening when I heard the knock on my door, slow, hesitant, almost ashamed. When I opened it, there stood David. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes hollow, his posture slouched. He looked nothing like the proud man who once told me to disappear. He looked like a boy again, lost and desperate. "Dad," he whispered, his voice breaking. I need your help." For a moment, I just looked at him, the son I had carried, the man who had betrayed me, the beggar now standing in the doorway of the father he once threw away. "Help?" I said evenly. "When I asked for respect, you gave me rent. When I asked for dignity, you gave me a basement. And now, when you have nothing left, you want what? My money?" He shook his head quickly, tears brimming in his eyes. "No, Dad, not money. Guidance. Forgiveness. I've lost everything. Clara left. The debts. The house. It's all gone. I don't know what to do anymore." His words pierced me, not with sympathy, but with clarity. This wasn't about wealth. It was about consequence. I stepped aside and let him in. He sat at my table, the same table where Mary and I once dreamed of family dinners filled with laughter, not greed. He buried his face in his hands and sobbed like the boy he once was. I let the silence hang, then finally spoke. "Son, life gave you a test, and you failed. You chose greed over love. You chose pride over humility. You chose convenience over respect, and now you are paying the price. That is justice. But it is also mercy, because if you are wise, you can still learn from it." He looked up at me, eyes red, voice trembling. "Do you hate me, Dad?" I shook my head slowly. "No, son, I don't hate you. I pity you, but I will not carry you anymore. You must rebuild yourself with your own hands, the way I once rebuilt everything for you." Tears rolled down his cheeks, but I could see something else there too, understanding. The first spark of humility I had seen in years. I stood and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Respect is worth more than $75 million. Remember that. Because once it's gone, no fortune can buy it back." And with that, The story closed. If you've listened this far, remember this lesson. Greed destroys, but wisdom endures. If you believe respect is the greatest inheritance a father can leave, subscribe to Wise Revenge. Share your story in the comments, and let's remind the world together, no amount of money can outweigh a father's dignity.